every mom has the capacity to be CEO because the things that you do in your family and, where you take in information and you make decisions and you weigh the pros and cons and you have conversations and you source new resources and all of those things are all things that when you are building a company and running a company, that's what happens. And I feel like there is sort of this idea of like, I am now going to give myself credit for the things that I really know and how that the skills that I've learned here in keeping humans alive transfers out into a different way.
Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Welcome to this week's episode of the And Both podcast. My guest is Jen White. She is the founder and chief brand strategist for Collective Memory and has been an entrepreneur for over 2 decades. She is the person that when you hear the conversation or when you hear the phrase, homes run like businesses and moms are the CEO of those businesses, that is exactly what this conversation is about. It is a connection between entrepreneurship and being a founder and what it means to grow and build a brand and a company from scratch and how that parallels what we're doing in motherhood and family building and where there's more connection there than we give credit for and how we can rely on learning in one instance to inform performance or decisions in the other instance. And so it was just a lovely opportunity to speak CEO to CEO, but also mother to mother, and ways in which she's noticed overlap over time, but also her kids are older than mine. And so I think that that's always a really incredible opportunity as a mom to see someone who is further down the line. Her kids are older and she is navigating different things, but how her look back at where she was feeling when her kids were my age and how that's changed over time is always a conversation that I really love having because, we're not going to see the future or know the future, but it's interesting to hear other people's perspectives and stories and how they've navigated the transition from the early stages of motherhood to having teenagers. And I loved it. I loved having somebody on who is refreshingly open about the good and the not so great parts and what we're all sort of needing to give ourselves credit for in the motherhood and entrepreneurship lanes. So enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the And Both podcast. I am here today with Jen White. Welcome and thank you for having me. Yes. How about if we start off with you letting people know who you are and all of those things?
Yeah, I would love to. My name is Jen White, and I am the founder and chief brand architect of Collective Memory. We are a consultancy/agency that works at the intersection between business and brand strategy to really help founders, stakeholders, leadership, executives see over the horizon and really understand how to really grow mind share and market share to build and grow their companies.
That's cool. How long have you done that for?
I've been self-employed for 24 years. I graduated from college and really sort of jumped into the, sort of my entrepreneurial side. But, it was an evolution. I didn't start out at 21 saying, oh, I'm going to help you, run your business. So it's hard to say exactly, but, I guess I would say within in the last 10 to 15 years, I've really been working more with larger organizations and executives, both domestically and internationally, to really sort of see through this work in larger organizations.
That's cool. I think I'm always so fascinated by like the early entrepreneurship piece because I feel like, people sort of that was the norm. Like when my grandparents were younger, like that was the norm, right? Like if you wanted to like have a job, you either went and worked for like a big company or you started your own business, but there was no like work for a little bit and start your own business. So I'm always fascinated because I feel like there's so much pressure and there's been so much pressure in the last couple decades of like go to college and get experience and do all of those things. But every once in a while it's like, I'm going to take a left right out the gate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've been hearing that a lot, especially from working moms, moms who are like, I just can't be at the office 24/7, I need to be at home with my family and then squeeze work in where I can.
Yeah. And I think too, like the idea that there is no other option is, especially in the last couple of years, has really like that whole assumption has really been torn apart in a good way, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, more and more people are popping into my sphere who are really smart, really interesting women who are, going out on their own and paving their own way. I think that if I were to have done it again, I would not do what I did. I definitely I had a lot of, I wouldn't say struggles. Like it was always pretty easy to get clients and, like make a good living. But I had to really learn a lot on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the benefit of working for a company and then taking that expertise and best practices out into the field and using that yourself is so much easier than trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. So when I graduated and got my license and started practicing, I was in a place where there really weren't many full-time jobs. And so I got my license and I went back to school to like continue on. And so I started practicing clinically, but I couldn't do full-time, which is where like as a new grad therapist, you got oversight and you had a mentor and all of that stuff. So when I started per diem just because I needed the hours and I was not going to work in a restaurant ever again was my goal.
Same.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Like I'm not scraping someone else's plate. Unbeknownst to me, I have 4 children now. So like I scrape plates, but I know the people's plates that I'm scraping and all of that. But I remember feeling like that way because it was per diem. They're like, you come in and we like plug and play a therapist, right? And so I was a new grad. I didn't know, I knew what I was doing, but I didn't really know in that setting, like how things go. Legitimately trial by fire my entire career. And then when I transitioned to full time, they were like, oh, well, you've already been here for a couple of years. And I was like, yeah, but like a mentor would be cool.
Helping hand, please.
Yeah.
Like, direction.
Yeah. They were like, no, you got it.
Great.
It's totally fine. And I was like, I guess I got it. But yeah.
Well, but at the same time, like I do think that we don't give ourselves enough credit. I mean, I think that if you have, I think that my sense of observation is really strong and yours must be as well, because if you can just take a minute and look around and understand how everything's working, you have a sense for how to make it work for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I did have like, there were some people there, like I did work on the weekends, like when it wasn't so busy, where I could be like, by the way, where is this located?
Right. What's the file on that? Like, how do I file that? Yeah.
So
totally.
I was like sort of left to my own devices to wander around a little bit. And like, I mean, it was helpful in the end, but yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that. Like, okay, I'm here now, but like, where's here? What am I doing?
Yeah. I definitely did a lot of sleuthing too in my early career. I would sort of like have a friend who worked at an agency and I'd be like, so Like, how does it work? You know, what do you do when
Yeah.
you, and then, I had this, I don't know how I came across her. I had this really great woman who I think she wrote a book, and I wrote to her as, just, sort of a fangirl. And I said, gosh, I love your book. Cause I was reading just, business books upon business books to understand, how I was supposed to do things. And I wrote to her, and she said, yeah, my main gig is I put together proposals for clients, and I could do that for you. And it was really expensive. It was not anything that I should have been paying for at the time,
Hmm.
but it really helped me to just understand operationally how I was supposed to, how I was really supposed to hold my clients accountable, and how I was supposed to deliver the work and be accountable to that scope of work. So that was really good, and I think that it's easy enough to sort of find those mentors if you're savvy, but it's really nice to be given one on a platter.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's like, I ended up, when I went into full time, my mentor ended up being younger than I was. And I actually knew her. We went to high school together, and she graduated the year before me. But it was just like she had gone through and done like a combined bachelor's, master's degree. And so she had gone through in 5 years. Whereas
Right.
I did 4 years. There was a year in between, and then I did 2 years. And I was like, so she had already been at the company for a couple of years, and she was like, I'm not sure why I'm like telling you this. Like, you're older than me. And I was like, hey, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I think finding, like, early in my career, finding a mentor was something I talked about a lot.
Mhm.
And then, it's hard because I don't think that they're not just like, here I am, your mentor. There's not like a blinking sign over
Yeah.
someone's head. But, I do have a few mentors now that I really appreciate. And I think they put ideas into my head that, like, they see in me
Mhm.
that I don't see in myself. And it's just so wonderful to have a mirror held up in a way that just to show you the perspective that you never see.
Yeah. It's that idea of, I can't remember who wrote that book now, but they talk about like, if you wouldn't say it to your friends, don't say it to yourself, kind of thing. Like, if
Mhm.
if you can't imagine that like perspective or whatever for somebody else, or like, what would you say to somebody else if they were in the situation that you're in right now? And it's like having that idea. I cannot remember the name. It has completely left me. I can see the title, like the cover of the book, but it's that idea of like, sometimes like, we need a mirror, but we have a funhouse mirror, right? Where you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
qualified. And people are like, no, like, you're totally qualified.
Yeah, it's so interesting. She introduced me, my mentor now, and use that word very, very loosely. She's an older woman that I always call when I need, advice or ideas. And we were at an industry event together, and she introduced me as one of the best CEOs. And I was like, wait, I'm not even a CEO. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I left that meeting, and I was like, Mona, why did you introduce me as a CEO? She goes, are you kidding me? You have been running your company for decades. 100%. If you step into anyone else's company and you start running it, you are running it from the top. You are not running it as, you're not over here running it from the
Yeah.
side, running it at the top. And, it's funny because I haven't even totally internalized this. As you could tell, I introduced myself as chief brand architect, but it's starting to sink in a little bit. And, I don't know if this is my, imposter syndrome kind of like, rearing up a little bit, but which is something I don't think I have. But, I mean, I think as a woman, it's hard to say, yeah, I'm the boss. I'm like 100% in charge, and, no one else is, um, I'm not accountable to anyone. So, it's just it's a hard thing to wrap your head around sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder too, like how old are your kids?
They're 10 and 12.
Okay. So in terms of like how your experience in like the corporate world, in terms of like figuring it out as you go, power of observations and things like that, like, do you feel like that has had an impact on how you've grown as like a mom and things that you pick up along the way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm always I'm always sleuthing too. I'm like, how am I supposed to be a mom, right? Like, totally. I'm like, listen to anybody who has kids who are older than mine. I am always listening to podcasts and reading books on what is the best practice on X, Y, and Z. And right now I'm reading a book called This Is Awkward, all about puberty.
Awesome title.
It's, yeah, it's so awkward. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have that same approach where I'm just trying to figure it out,
Right.
and I have this passion to, that I have to figure it out. I think that it's so far what I've deducted is that I'm raising humans, I'm raising people, and I need to be respectful of who they are, and I need to be in tune with who they are, and not treat them like, hey, you have to listen to me, I'm the boss, even though I'm the boss. But I have to give them I have to give them voice. I have to give them autonomy over themselves, and I also have to share with them the reasonings behind the sort of thoughts and decisions that are going into making us a family, and have their voices be heard too. One thing that's a recent podcast comes to mind. I've been really thinking a lot about like social media for my kids and, phone access, because, all their friends are on all these platforms. And I'm starting to think like, how am I going to navigate this? Currently, it's no, no, no. But I think that I just listened to a podcast, maybe it was a New York Times article. I can't remember. But, the takeaway was like, yeah, it's not good for your kids. Like, it's not good for their developing brains. But it's also kind of difficult to say 100% no. So really the best answer is educate, talk about it, always have it top of mind, always be having a conversation about it so that you can be guiding best choices and help them to make best choices. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. Again, that goes back to my philosophy of like, I'm raising humans. And so I need to respect them as humans and help them make the right choices.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like that there's such a carryover in the experience of like think about, I mean, this idea there, I mean, this has been written about a lot, but like this idea that like, women are naturally nurturers and we just like know how to do stuff. Like we don't. You leave the hospital with a baby and you're like, or like you adopt a baby and they come into your house and you're just like, okay, so like now what? Right? And I feel like it's that we don't give ourselves the credit for all of the skills and the context that we learn in motherhood and apply it outward into other areas. Not apply it, but carry it out. It's not like every mom needs to be CEO, but I just think that every mom has the capacity to be CEO because the things that you do in your family and, where you take in information and you make decisions and you weigh the pros and cons and you have conversations and you source new resources and all of those things are all things that when you are building a company and running a company, that's what happens. And I feel like there is sort of this not emerging awareness because it's farther along than that, but this idea of like, I am now going to give myself credit for the things that I really know and how that the skills that I've learned here in like, keeping humans alive transfers out into a different way and then pushed on by this whole, like, I can't go into the office because like it costs $60,000 in Massachusetts a year per kid for daycare. So it's like all of these things where people are like, all right, I don't have to go down this tunnel of like what employment looks like and what motherhood looks like. I have all of these skills from all of these other things that I do. What am I going to do? And
Mm-hmm.
how that goes out.
Yeah, and I think that relating motherhood back to being a leader, I also think that, what you're trying to do when you're, raising a family is you're trying to make a successful team,
Yeah.
right? It's really the same thing and the same principles apply. And, it takes work and effort. I mean, I am like deep into like team building research now. I mean, that's all I think about. And so lessons from both worlds apply.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and if you think about it too, like, who is the best boss you ever worked with? Like, it's the person that saw you as a human, treated you with respect, gave you autonomy over decisions. They provided the structure that you needed in order to know like where you needed to go and where you didn't need to go. And they were responsible for themselves, and they were responsible for their role and the components of their role in running the company.
Yeah, it's the exact same. I
Yeah.
mean, when you put it like that, it's 100%. That's who I want to be as a mom. That's who I want to be as a CEO. I want to make sure that we all come together and there's harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's being successful in their own right.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely identify with the mentorship piece that you're talking about when it comes to motherhood. Like, I mean, I think it's easy for us to be like, I don't know how to do my job. Or it's easy for me to be like, I don't really know how to do this whole thing. But like in when it comes to motherhood, because there is this idea of like women just know and all of those things, where it's such a bigger jump over or a bigger first step to be able to say like, I actually have no sweet clue what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But like when you go to the playground or when you go to like, whatever, the first person that says, oh God, I have no idea, is always the person that everyone's like, the heads all turn and they're like, wait, you don't know either?
What?
Let's be friends. You don't know.
What?
Perfect.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was so lucky as a young mom. I had this fantastic, okay, this is going to be a funny story. I had this fantastic real estate agent who helped us buy a house in like kind of a really sketchy part of Los Angeles. And she was just like, we started talking to her when she was pregnant, and then we finally bought a house from her when she had a 2-year-old, so like,
oh my gosh,
we worked with her for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we bought this house and we were in it a couple of years and we were still friends. And then when I got pregnant, she goes, oh my God, I need to introduce you to your nanny share. And I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to get like nannies from my real estate agent, but she introduced me to this like wonderful woman in our neighborhood that had 2 older kids and also was pregnant with her third. And so, we just totally hit it off, and we shared our nanny and, all of that. But I just remember like after work going to her house and picking up my baby and sitting on the couch and nursing him and saying to her, like all of these kind of like concerns and anxiety of over being a new mom. And she just kept looking at me and she was like, well, the answer is like, you're good. And like, don't sweat the small stuff. Like you're like, she just was totally that mentor for me and really helped me to have confidence and not be suffering from imposter syndrome, as the new mom. And even now she's one of my best friends. And last week she was telling me about her middle child's teenage escapades and like picking her up off some, porch in LA where she and her friend are like throwing up over the railing of the porch. And I'm like, oh my God, like that was traumatizing. I can't believe you told me that story. And she's like, well, you're going to have to deal with that. You know, you're going to have to be a parent around that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, yeah, right. It's coming. But it's so wonderful. Like I can't tell you how grateful I am to have her in my life
Yeah.
to, just help me. And even like her oldest went to college last year and she was, she was like telling me all the financial documents and all of like how you navigate getting your kid into college and not paying full tuition and like having enough money to afford it and all of I mean, it's just there's so much that is coming up.
Yeah. And it's also constant too. Like, I think that that's the thing, right? It's like you have a new baby and you're like, okay, well, like all of this stuff is like crazy transition pieces. And then you're like, okay, well, they get into school. It's not even close because it's never going to be over. And it's that idea of having somebody that's a couple of steps ahead of you that's saying, yeah, no, that's great, but like now this is what's coming at you. So you have the opportunity to prepare for that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I had when my first was born, I was in the hospital and it's one of those things where like you're in like everything has just changed, right? Like so dramatically in your life. Like when you have your first baby, it's never the same, right? Like it's did like your whole world shifts. And I remember being in the hospital and I had like a really not so wonderful delivery, but like who does, right? Like the process
Yeah.
is a thing. And I remember that I was like, sort of like, okay, do we have to do this? And all of a sudden I had all of these questions and the pediatrician came in and her name is Dr. Fung. I will never forget her. She worked at, she was like, she had this like crazy career of like, she worked at Children's in Boston and this like, one of those people that's just like, you read their resume and you're like, I don't even know if I can talk to you because you're so smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she came in and I'm like asking her all these questions and she's like looking at me kind of like, okay. And she's this teeny tiny little woman. And my daughter was born in February and she is wrapped up in like this gigantic scarf that looks like it's like, one of those blanket scarf things. And she's all like
Yeah.
cuddled up. And she looks at me at the end of my entire monologue of like, what about this? And like, what about this? And before we leave, blah, blah, blah. She looks at me dead in the eye and goes, babies live in caves. You'll be fine. And I was like, okay. But like, what about like feeding or whatever? Like, she was like people have been having babies for a really long time and people have been having babies that lived for a really long time. And like, you're going to be fine.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with one of my kids' pediatrician when he was first starting solid food. We were like, oh God, what are we supposed to feed him? Blah, blah, blah. And she looked at me and she said, my first one, I went through all the stuff, and was nervous about it. And then I had twins. And she said, I think their first food was peanut butter and jelly off the floor. So, you're fine. Like whatever your kid wants to eat. And I was like, thanks.
You're like, they're still alive, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, yes. And you're like, okay. Reference check.
Yeah. But I do think that, that kind of like reassurance from trusting people that you can really put your trust in it's like a weight lifts off your shoulders. I mean, did you feel that when she said that to you?
Yeah. Like, I'm not kidding. I went on to have 3 more children. And still, like every once in a while, because none of them are the same. You think that you're like, oh, I kept one alive. Like, this will be great. And then, like, you get a whole different roll of the dice and you're like, okay. But throughout the years of the last 11 years of having people, like, growing and progressing and changing, every once in a while, like, my husband will look at me or I'll look at him and we'll literally quote that to each other. And it's like, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Fung. Like, I don't know where you are in the world, but
they live.
Yeah.
Yes.
They live.
They live.
It's going to be.
I know. It's like, sometimes I think about it as like when we all got married, I mean, I don't know about you, but I like stressed about my wedding. I was like, the flowers need to be just so, and it's gonna have to be like sunny, 70 degrees. I mean, like I was just like, needed to have this picture perfect idea for a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm, 17 or 18 years into my marriage, like I don't even like the wedding was just a blip,
Yeah.
It's just a blip in the experience. And it has no reference to, how we are as partners at all. And I sometimes think about like, sort of the birth in the same way. We all get so nervous and we're like, oh God, it has to be perfect. And, all this stuff has to go right. But like, in the end, that's just a little blip, traumatic blip in our relationship with our children.
Yeah.
And it's something I kind of try to remind people when they're getting nervous about, having the baby and all of the things and questions that come from that. It's like, it's just a little blip.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of ups and downs on this path of parenting.
Yeah. It's like the farther along you get, like the more you zoom out. So like in the moment, that blip is enormous. But like as time goes on, I always think it's funny that I had when I went in and they were like, what is your birth plan? I had no birth plan. So when I went in, they were like, what is your birth plan? And I said, my birth plan is to be unpregnant at the end of this experience. And they were
not baby.
Yeah. And they were like, what? And I was like, I am all done being pregnant and I would like to not be pregnant anymore. And we are all stuck in this room together until I am unpregnant. And they were
I love that.
who are you? And I'm like, I am someone with heartburn. Who has not slept. And I would like I have punched my ticket for this ride and the journey has come to an end. However horribly. I also tried to call off my own delivery in the middle of my delivery. Like I tried to wrap it up like it was an actual therapy session. Like I was like, we have all done a really great job here today. Legitimately. We have all done a really great job here today. But I think like pack it up and like reconvene tomorrow. I was not high on anything. Like I just like I was like, I am done now. And I remember a midwife looked at me and she was like, oh honey, there's only one way off this ride. And I was like, unfortunately, I know what you're talking about.
Oh my God. I was so like when I went into I was so like you. I was done being pregnant. And so I did all the induction acupuncture and all the stuff. I just was like, I cannot be pregnant anymore. I wasn't sleeping. Like I kept having these like weird dreams where I gave birth to like animals.
Perfect. Perfect.
I was like, I just can't have these nightmares anymore.
Right?
And then I went on to name my first son Fox. So maybe the name like just manifested out of those like subconscious dreams. But I remember like I had my kids in Los Angeles. So there was like a lot of hippy dippy, conversations, and a lot of my friends were having home births and all this. And so I was just listening to these like midwife, like Ina May conversations around like how, exciting and beautiful birth is and how it can be euphoric and, all of this. And so I had no idea that, what it was really going to be like. And I remember I hired a doula and we went into the hospital and I was like, feeling kind of like, not great. And all of a sudden I hear this woman screaming in the other room. And I looked at my doula and I go, oh, I thought that was only in the movies that like women screamed.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, well, she probably just had her baby just now. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to hurt a lot. This is going to be intense.
And that's why there's 8 billion people on the planet. That's right there. In a nutshell, that's why there's 8 billion people, because there's this undertone of like, it'll be great. And then you all go in and it's like freaking dead woman walking down the maternity hallway where you're like, what is happening here? And then you forget, and then you have more kids. That's 100%.
No, there's
Mm-hmm.
something so weird about it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember right before I had Fox, I have this like Hungarian friend who's like very blunt. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, great. The next time I see you, you'll be split in two."
You were like, no,
Peter,
thank you.
please don't ever say that to anyone ever again.
Word to the wise. Like, this
Yeah.
joke did not land where you wanted it to, buddy. Like, no, thank you.
No, don't say that again. It really, yeah. I mean, it does start out traumatic. And I think that people get nervous about, they're like, I've got to stay home the first 3 months. I've got to, be there for my kid and my family. And I mean, my kid slept through the first 3 months. I was lucky, but he slept through the first 3 months. So I was like bored beyond belief. But, I don't necessarily know if like babyhood is the difficult part.
Yeah.
I think it's all varying degrees of hard.
Yeah, like I think about it like I don't know. It's like a pie chart, I guess, that's like constantly moving, right? Like when they're really young, there's like physically alive. Like that's like the biggest slice of the pie. And then as they like, they pick their head up, they don't roll off roll off to something, they don't choke, they,
Right.
blah blah blah, that pie actually gets smaller. It never goes away, because like, again, like if you got kids thrown up over the railing, like there's a physical element of like trying to keep somebody alive in a less maybe harrowing kind of way. But then you then you get into that like emotional cognitive piece. And that I feel like as the physical goes down, the piece of the emotional, like the social emotional, just gets bigger and bigger. And at the end, like when they go off into the world, the social emotional piece is most of the pie.
That's
hard.
where you must benefit from being, a therapist, because that's where it's such a struggle, because you don't have a Band-Aid to put over it.
Yeah.
You don't have a boo-boo buddy that you just, pull out of the. When your kids are coming home and they're complaining about not being liked at school or getting into a confrontation or being bullied on a text message, like these are all things that you're like,
right.
Oh my God, how do I navigate this? Emotional stuff is like heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Heart-wrenching.
And the thing too is like it goes from like you being able to like entirely solve the problem to you now walking alongside somebody as they solve that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the piece, like that's the CEO piece too of it, right? Where it's like you can make all the decisions as when you decide to like build a business, and you can make all of the decisions or, collaboratively make decisions when they can't make any decisions for themselves. But eventually the goal is for them to be autonomous human beings that carry off on into the world and make it a better place. But that doesn't come from like you continuing to be the one that makes the decisions. And that's hard because it's like, how do you know? And like, they're going to screw up and you're going to screw up. And sometimes like, the things don't align, but like that process, I feel like the amount of intellectual energy and emotional energy is exhausting beyond getting up 5 times a night.
It's yeah. I had actually a rough spring because of some, the emotional sort of ups and downs of, my children's experience at school and socially. And it takes a toll, a real physical toll, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, because you want to go like they are learning, but like in the process of them learning, like they're getting their heart stepped on sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to not want, I mean, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but it's really hard sometimes to not want to like just go in there and like, blow the doors open and be like, I know, like a global no for all of this.
Yeah. Like you can't sit next to him anymore and don't talk to him like that.
Mm-hmm.
No one cares about Fortnite but you.
I don't even know what Fortnite is. That's how irrelevant this whole process is. This whole conversation. No one cares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
Yeah, exactly.
You know
Exactly.
what's cool? Riding your bike.
What's cool is being kind. Kindness is cool. And
Yeah.
you're like, I am a walking dare ad. Oh my God. Here I am. I have really fully realized my potential. I am now a spokesperson. I think I'm the high
Yes.
school resource officer. Holy crap, what
Yes.
just happened?
Exactly. 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 I know. I know. But I think this is such a great conversation to have because, if you really do think about it, like you are the CEO of this family, I think you can approach it a little bit differently and, approach it much more as a guide and a mentor than as a protective parent.
Mhm.
And you know, I see so many parents now being overprotective and, sort of not letting their kids. I mean, I don't know if the era of helicopter parents is still around, but I definitely feel like parents are really focused on helping their kids as much as they can.
Mhm.
And, whether that's carrying their backpack to school when they're in, third grade or, going into class and being like, no, you little kid, no, don't say that. Uh, but, I think that I like to be critical of those parents a lot, and I probably shouldn't be because sometimes I probably am overprotective like that. But, I think that thinking about it more like in the CEO with the CEO lens, will result in that healthier human in the end, really,
Mhm.
that rather than sort of like, protecting someone and saying, this is a shield, you can't get by, but helping that, your child create that shield for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like if you circle it back to like work and parenting, like also for me, in my experience of feeling like I was at a place where, like, as an employee, having like knowing that if I made decisions that didn't work out or that I took chances on things or whatever, that the person that I worked for was going to understand that I had tried, and that person believed that like I was acting in the best interest of. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's something too that is, I think, like, we want, as parents, like, we believe the best in our children, right? And we want the best for them and things like that. Also wanting to impart on them that, like, if it goes south or it doesn't work out that way, like, I'm still here. And that idea of like, right, like, so your friend that is the realtor who goes and picks up her kid who is sick at a party, the fact that that kid is sick and is in trouble, and like, all of that has transpired, does not change the overall fact that, like, when stuff has hit the fan, she called her mom. So it's like,
That's what, yes,
that's what you
that's what my
want.
friend was. So she was like, I am so pleased
Yeah.
that I was able to be trusted in that situation.
Yeah. And
I was
that's
that's the goal.
that's what you want. Like, so like, right, like, we can't make it so. And I feel like that's the generations before us where it was like, do what I say, not what I do. Don't screw up. Like, everything was very hard boundaries. Whereas now, like, that's a perfect example. I'm telling you, like, don't do this, right? Like, do not advise going and like having this whole thing. However, you have gone into this situation, you have gotten yourself, you took a left and went down the path that I told you was like not great, but you trusted me enough, and like you knew that I as a parent was going to act in your best interest, and that I just want you to be safe and all of those things. So you call and I come get you. Like, to me, your kid's going to feel like garbage, and like they're going to learn that lesson in some way, shape, or form, and probably over and over again. Let's be
Yeah.
honest, right? Like, happy frontal lobe.
Yeah.
But like the fact that when they're in that crisis, they know that they can call you, like, ugh, Dairy Queen all around here.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, coming out of that, she said, like, the kids were doing shots, and she was like, your physical size, you are too small
Yeah.
to be doing shots. Like, if you do a shot and a boy does a shot who is 6 foot, whatever, 60 pounds, 70 pounds, like you're 120 pounds, 5'4".
Yeah.
Like it's going to affect you a lot differently than it affects him. So like you need to just say, I don't do shots. I'll
Yeah.
take the shot and I'll mix it with some stuff and I'll sip it over the next hour and a half. But like, you can't do shots, like just bottom line. And I was like, oh, it's great that she took it that far. Like I probably would have been like, don't do shots, but she explained it in a way that made sense to the kid that was like, oh, right. Like I'm just not going to be able to metabolize that. Like, because I'm my size. And it made sense for her kid too, to say, okay, well, there's a reason why I should say no.
Mm-hmm. Not just like, because really, like, what is she going to say like the next time this happens, right? She's not going to say, no, my mom told me I couldn't do shots. Well, my mom also told me I can't be here and I'm here anyway. So like, at what point do we just like discount all, like, you can't throw the whole book out. Yes, you're going to be there doing the thing that you're not supposed to be doing. But ideally, right, the logic of like, no, I can't. And it makes sense to me. And this is what I can do. Like, that's moving forward.
And that's how they create their own shields, like that's us leaving an impression of an arm around their shoulder so that they understand how they can use that to, protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so much more powerful than, us as parents being there to say, no, like, let me just, I'll provide the goals here, like stay in my lane and whatever.
Yeah.
I think it is making the kid ultimately much more of a responsible human.
Yeah. And I think too, there's an element that we don't always talk about where it's like, when you have the next generation, it's like, don't you wish that that's what you got when you were younger? Like, instead of like, don't go to this, don't do this, don't do this because I said so, right? Like, we can put because I said so as like, God, can we just put that away in the drawer?
Never. It is like actually in my consciousness to never say that to my children because I always got that. And I was like, but I don't understand. Like, I'm a responsible kid. I'm not going to go off the deep end. Please just let me go to that Grateful Dead concert. 16. And, the answer was still no, because I said so. And I was like, well, I'm going to just take a cab. I'm going to go anyway.
Right. Oh, look, last minute sleepover that just came up, because that is like, it's them not trusting that you can make these choices. But now, you see, like, I mean, I'm really thankful that to have had the experience, speaking of social media, like to have had the experiences of my like teenagehood and college when there was no social media and there's no like, cameras on phones and things like that. Yeah. Because I do ultimately believe that it would have accelerated a lot of the stuff that we see now. Like there is, I mean, maybe not a benefit, but there's like a side teaching that comes from having, someone literally being able to like air your laundry.
Yeah.
But I think that it's helpful that this way of like giving people autonomy and conversation and, making them responsible for their own choices by allowing them to like screw it up and stuff like that. The fact that has happened in the same emergence of social media and the fact that you are responsible for your things because there's like a public option there. I just feel like we as parents this was our experience. This is what we want for our kids. Like it's not even the same language. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why we look for community with other moms and other parents that are in this space versus like way back when. Like it's harder to ask your parents like, well, what? And because the answer is always because I said so, or because this, or because this. Like everything is so black and white and we just have so much gray now.
Yeah. But I think the gray is good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do think it's good. I want my kids to kind of live in that gray and to realize for themselves, oh yeah, like I'm not going to make that choice because it's not good for me,
Yeah.
like my son he's 12 and he's signing up to sort of be a fairly, I would say, I'm not going to say professional athlete, but he's digging into athleticism in a way that is much more intense than I think a lot of kids do. He's going to a ski academy, starting this year. So he's like, he wants to be a World Cup skier. And, one of the things I keep saying to him is I'm like, hey, listen, like, you know, you have to realize what you're signing up for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're signing up to be an elite athlete. And that's awesome. Like, I am so impressed by that. But what that also means is that you need to treat your body like you're an athlete. So you're going to be needing to prioritize your food. You're going to need to prioritize sleep. You're going to need to prioritize not putting any toxins into your body, because that's not going to improve your performance. And he's like, right, right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. And it's just like, I think helping them to understand, what does this really mean? Like, what is my goal? How am I going to get to my goal? And what are the things that I'm going to have to sacrifice in order to be there? So, having that as a reason for him to understand that he needs to make smart choices, I think it's actually a gift, but also helps him to really understand, this is the person I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to make these decisions because this is who I want to be. And I think more parents, even if your kid isn't going to go be an elite athlete, I think more parents could have those conversations around, like, what's your goal? What's your vision? And how are we going to get you there?
Mm-hmm.
What is the trajectory? Like, my other kid wants to go work at Lego and be a Lego designer. And so I'm like, okay, here's the path to get there. And here are the things that you need to be thinking about to make sure that happens for yourself, so that you're not sidetracked. And, you're going to have to do all of these things and be really proactive about your future.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if more parents thought that way and helps their kids see that, then it would be easier for their kids to make choices that are responsible for their future.
Yeah. And I think that's where, the notion of like the helicopter parent versus like the lawnmower parent versus like all of that stuff. Like, I do really hope that all of that as a bucket is on its way out, because I think like what you're saying in there is not that. I don't think that that's helicoptering or lawnmowing or whatever. I think that is coming at it from this collaborative standpoint, right? Like, you didn't say to your kid, you know what, you can ski really well, so like, let's sign you up for this. That's
Yeah, no,
helicoptering. When they
yeah,
like when they say to you, Mom, I really like this and I really want to do this, and I think that someday I could do this. And it's coming up with the plan to like carry them through step by step by step. And yes, there are parts where like, they are fully responsible for what happens in some parts of that. And then also you come in some places with like, a lot of the logistics and a lot of
yeah,
they can find the place, but they've got to go to the place. And so that's how people work together in that way, but that the ultimate goal is directed by them.
yeah. And that's how it was with us. We weren't like, I mean, this is like a huge financial endeavor for us. And so we weren't like, yeah, sign us up,
We've been
spend
waiting.
tons of money. Oh, no, no. We were like, you sure?
Mm-hmm.
You really? You sure? Like, we could get you a new bike.
Right? Like,
But, so what is this going to be called? Is this partnership parenting, or, I mean, what is it like? What do we coin it?
I just really enjoy the like collaborative parenting. Like,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's the evolution that is, it's how do you talk about it in a way that there is collaboration, but there is still hierarchy, like everyone, and that's how it works. Like, that's how it works in business, right? Like,
Mhm.
ultimately the CEO of the company is the person whose face is on the billboard, and that's tied to all of those things. And they want the people in there to grow in their roles and to, carry on to the next level for them and what that means. And then eventually they leave the company and they go off and they maybe start their own company. And that's just like, let's just keep this metaphor going.
Totally.
But it's like entrepreneurship parenting, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
you're figuring it out as you go, and you are flexible, and you are meeting people where they're at, and it's like this constant recalibration of needs and wants and planning and things like that.
I love this so much, Ashley. I'm so happy we had this conversation.
Well, this
is what I was so good.
Yeah, like this is what I was talking about. Like, so before you and I started recording, I get this question all the time where people are like, a lot of podcasts, they have like, it's really structured, right? And so, you'll like ask to be on, or someone will reach out to you or whatever. And it's like, there's a set of questions and stuff like that. And I have been on a couple of those and they're great. They're wonderful. But like, I just feel like there's so much magic in just sort of like, it's like the coon hound, right? On the trail. It's like, oh, what's this? What's this? Let's follow this trail and see where it goes. Because I think that people have like the stories, but then I think there's also so many different components that inform those stories. And so I always like to keep it really open-ended, also because I have what I call the like bus stop personality, or I've been told I have the like bus stop where it's like people come in and they're like, hey, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, okay, tell me something. And then the bus comes and they leave. And I'm like, bye. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's like that. I think it's
right.
there. It's the therapy piece and the fact that like, given the type of therapist, like being an occupational therapist, like you are in people's like lives in a very intimate way very quickly. And so you have to be able to bridge that gap of like, hey, so I know you've got to have a shower and I know that we just met each other and we've got to figure out how to do this. And like, hi, by the way, tell me about your life.
Yeah.
And all of that. But I just think that there is so much magic in like the nuances of our lives that need, and especially as parents.
100%. I totally agree. Well, I've loved having this conversation. And next time we have to talk about business therapy, because I feel like that's what I do for my clients.
Yes.
So we can dig into, how businesses need therapists.
Yes. Well, yes, you have to come back because I have ideas. There's lots of ideas.
Okay.
I'm scribbling down ideas as we go here. But yes, thank you so much for joining me today. And I appreciate all of the business and the parenting components of that. So thank you.
Yeah. So fun. So fun. Awesome, Ashley. It's been great chatting. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.